Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairperson. Deputy Minister, Honorable Thabang Makwetla, Cabinet colleagues and Deputy Ministers, Chairperson and members of the Portfolio Committee on Defense and Military Veterans, co-chairs and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Defense, honorable members, senior leadership of the defense establishment led by the Chief SANDF and the SecDef, distinguished guests, friends and fellow South Africans. Chairperson, it is an honor to present the Budget Vote 19 on this first sitting of the 6th Parliament following the recent national elections. I congratulate the Deputy Minister Thabang Makwetla on his return to this portfolio. I'm confident together we'll make a formidable team leading our Ministry of Defense and Military Veterans. I also extend a word of welcome to the newly established Portfolio Committee and its Honorable Chair, Comrade Cyril Xaba. It is with a deep sadness that we report, and I hope that this House will mourn with us as defense and within the ranks of the SANDF, the passing of a military veteran, Ike Mapoto, one of our stalwarts and the veteran of Umkhonto weSizwe. I welcome students from Siviwe Special School in Gugulethu who are present with us here this morning. I think they are somewhere in the gallery. This school has been adopted by the South African Navy. This is a special school. Please stand up so that the people can see you. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Chairperson, ours is a vast portfolio, being the sole establishment with a constitutional mandate for the defense of our country's national sovereignty and territorial integrity. In presenting the 29th budget of the entire defense portfolio, we hope we shall raise the confidence of the South African public. Its support is sought to enable us to fully execute our mandate. Further, we are appearing before this House in the confines of a severely constrained national fiscus, which has had a devastating impact on the conduct of our business and the fulfillment of our obligations. Our presentation will give you a bird's eye view into the defense portfolio and community of the military veterans, as well as what plans are in place and being executed to ensure the social well-being of military veterans, as well as the attendant challenges. Chairperson, this morning we recall that Section 85(1) and 2 of the Constitution vests the executive authority of the Republic in the President, and which is exercised together with other cabinet members. Section 92(1) of the Constitution holds us responsible for the powers and functions as may be assigned by the President. And in subsection 2, the Constitution further holds us accountable to Parliament for the exercise of powers and the performance of functions. Further, Section 202(2) of the Constitution provides that command of the Defense Force must be exercised in accordance with the directions of the cabinet member responsible for defense, under the authority of the President. Chair, it is thus pertinent to note that this defense budget speech today is consistent with my constitutional duty to provide strategic direction to the entire defense function. And it is their moral and legal obligation to execute my strategic direction in the year that lies ahead. It is vitally important to reflect on the fundamental contribution that defense makes to the sovereignty of the Republic of South Africa and the authority of the state. I must remind the House of Section 2271A of the Interim Constitution of 1993, which pronounces that one of the functions of the Defense Force is, and I quote, for service in the defense of the Republic for the protection of its sovereignty and territorial integrity, close quote. Chairperson, consequently, we've developed a long-term strategic view focused on specific threats to the sovereignty of South Africa and the authority of the state that I must bring to your attention. South Africa's borders are the physical manifestation of the country's national sovereignty. South Africa seeks to build safer communities, fight corruption, and promote integrity through inter alia protecting the country's borders. We've continued our efforts to enhance the safeguarding of the land borders and airspace and preventing the flows of illicit goods and illegal immigration that compromise the Republic of South Africa's economy. The National Security Strategy requires that 22 Army sub-units and the support there to be deployed for border safeguarding, and I wish to restate that, to date, there has been insufficient funding to realize this. The challenge in the maritime environment is crime, illegal exploitation of maritime resources, piracy, and the uncontrolled movement of people and goods at sea. With more than 90% of its international economic activity being reliant on maritime trade, the protection of these routes for commercial shipping is of vital national interest to the nation and an international responsibility. During the February 2019 SONA, the President indicated that we will continue to advance peace on the continent and across the globe, taking forward Nelson Mandela's vision of a peaceful, stable, and just world. In these circumstances, we strive towards sustaining long-range maritime and air patrols in the Mozambican Channel and to expand such patrols to the West Coast. South Africa seeks to promote greater peace, security, and stability in the region and elsewhere on the continent in the fulfillment of Madiba's vision. The Defense Force makes a vital and unique contribution to these diplomatic efforts. Today, South Africa remains a significant contributor to peacekeeping operations on the continent, and we continue to have a significant presence in the Democratic Republic of Congo through MONUSCO and the Force Intervention Brigade. Our battalion within the FIB was commanded by a female, Lieutenant Colonel Tisetso Sekgobela, who is here with us this morning. Please stand. She led our soldiers successfully through a number of battles. Additionally, Lieutenant Dimakatso Raisibe Maila, stand please, served as the only female platoon commander of the Force Intervention Brigade. The other soldier who merits honorable mention in Parliament is Lieutenant Colonel Stephen King, stand up, for his display of remarkable courage under fire, which earned him the United Nations Captain Baye Medal for exceptional courage. His actions and those of his crew in this high-threat situation is the hallmark of the valor of battle skills that we strive for in our armed forces. Chairperson, we continue to conduct search and rescue, disaster relief, and humanitarian operations across the home front and in neighboring countries when called upon. Of particular note has been our recent response to the regional disaster caused by Cyclone Idai, as far afield as Mozambique and Malawi. Air assets and medical staff of the South African National Defense Force were deployed in a disaster relief operation under Operation Chariot. The Chaplain General, as the spiritual leader of the SANDF, facilitated a team of religious leaders to Mozambique to assess the damage, offer spiritual and moral support, and determine the mobilization of support through the South African Council of Churches. And I must say that this group was led by the Archbishop, Reverend Bohoba and Mpumlwana. Let me remind the House that the SANDF has carried out these interventions without reimbursement. The growing threat of terrorism, and fundamentalism by extremist groups is looming large and is a clear and present danger on the continent. South Africa is not immune to this threat, which has increased over the last few years, with groups continuing to have the ability to destabilize multiple countries at the same time. Like terrorism, cyber threats dominate the international security agenda, with states pursuing measures to secure their sovereignty and monitoring these trends on an ongoing basis. South Africa needs to adapt with the rapidly changing electronic environment through appropriate security measures. Organized and violent crime threaten and challenge the sovereignty, integrity, and the authority of the state, as well as the development and social cohesion of society in general. This cannot be allowed to persist. Chairperson, honorable members, it is important for government to ensure that all South Africans are and feel safe at all times in their homes, streets, or workplaces. The Commander-in-Chief has ordered the SANDF to deploy in cooperation with the South African Police Service in the Western Cape Province to combat crime and stabilize the security situation through intelligence-led operations. The ongoing intelligence assessment will then determine the right time for the withdrawal of the South African National Defense Force. We welcome the commitment by the President to the establishment of a National Security Council as was announced in February 2019. This will ensure that we all make a significant contribution by coordinating and integrating our national responses to pertinent threats and emerging crises. Our department will continue to support the broader economic and developmental initiatives of the 6th administration. Defense will continue to strive to support the defense industry as a discrete sector of the economy through meaningful participation in the President's Public-Private Growth Initiative, which seeks to harness the potential of the private sector in contributing to renewal, investment, and growth in the country. The resolving of uncertainty around denial and the impact thereof on smaller but critical industry players who hold sovereign technologies continues to be an issue of huge importance for the Defense Force. These smaller but very strategic members of the industry's supply chain are under extreme pressure in their efforts to survive. Many are poised to exit the defense industry if there is no immediate and urgent intervention. Furthermore, uncertainty in the industry has led to many skilled engineers being recruited by defense industry players outside of the Republic. Chairperson, as indicated in my speech in this House last year, we've launched the Defense Industry Charter. We've taken the deliberate decision to focus the defense spend on capital projects domestically and continually seek spin-offs technology benefits from defense to the mainstream economy of South Africa. To this end, we are also working with the defense industry to develop a defense industry business plan from 2019 to 2024. This business plan seeks to add jobs to the economy, grow export earnings, and attract foreign direct investment. A critical intervention here too must be increased administrative efficiency in the arms control system and the removal of cross-cutting inhibitors to doing business in all the economic sectors in South Africa. Using the expertise vested in AMSCO, we're developing models to optimize industry value within a diminishing capital budget, with a particular emphasis on the development of win-win DoD expenditure plans to ensure the survival of high-risk, high-value members of industry. In advancing social transformation, youth education, and skills development, the department runs a number of youth programs, such as the Young Falcons, with a specific focus on inculcating patriotism and discipline, whilst also assisting other departments with youth development initiatives. Furthermore, in recent times, we've intervened to stabilize the crisis at the provincial hospitals in Mahikeng, where we rendered essential services through the deployment of our health professionals. We've intervened to contain the raw sewage spills in the Vaal River. We've deployed engineers to assist the Tobotla municipality in the northwest with regards to the sewage failure systems. We've built bridges in those rural areas where there is an absence of infrastructure in isolated communities, and we've supported other institutions in firefighting, mountain and maritime search and rescue operations. Chairperson, defense continues to contribute to poverty alleviation and economic growth. As example, in recent times, we've supported Operation Pakisa towards unlocking the ocean's economy, in particular providing a secure environment for this accelerated economic growth initiative. We've expanded Project Kubatlala, to pursue the defense decentralized procurement of goods and services at a local level to be a catalyst for SMME's development and job creation. We've supported the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries in protecting South Africa's wildlife and marine resources. We've supported the National Parks Board in the protection of rhinos and other wildlife against criminal syndicates. We've contracted Damen Shipyards to build inshore patrol vessels and South Africa Shipyards in Durban to build a new hydrographic survey vessel in support of South Africa's international obligation to safety of life at sea. Over the last few years, the Department of Defense has been forced to continuously adjust its plans downwards in response to the declining budget. The Defense Force is becoming progressively more unsustainable in terms of declining defense allocations, and we've now reached a point where the Republic must decide on the kind of defense force it wants and what it can afford. I must regrettably inform you that this situation has not changed and has in fact become increasingly worse. We're being forced to adopt a short-term view with an increasingly constrained value proposition to South Africa and its people. Strategically, we are now becoming forced to transition from being mandate-driven to being funding-driven. Defense can only perform to the extent that it is resourced and funded. The significant reduction in the defense allocation has resulted in an ever-decreasing ability to execute ordered defense commitments. Honorable members, I must now ask the question whether or not the House is satisfied that the current resourcing of the Defense Force is consistent with the obligations placed on it by the Constitution. Last year, I reported a 2018 Mtf Baseline Reduction of 18.2 billion. The letter of allocation for 2020 Mtf further demands an additional 4.7 reduction, the majority of which lies in the compensation of employees. This reduction will certainly and directly impact on the training, equipment, sustainments, core capabilities, and operational output of the Defense Force. The above amounts to a nominal 22.9 billion reduction in the defense allocation over a 5-year period. I'm at pains to inform you that the above reduction may be potentially compounded by an even greater envisaged baseline reduction scenario for defense of 5% for 2020, 6% for 2021, and 7% for 2022. This may equate to an additional reduction of 9.6. The projected shortfalls on the compensation of employees have the following implications. During the financial year, a shortfall of 2.9 billion can possibly be funded from the operating budget. Over the MTF, if the scenarios are not factored in, then the shortfall increases to 4 billion, 4.5 billion, and 5.5 billion respectively, with no provisions in the operating budget to cover the shortfalls. Chair, this House should be very concerned that the funding for defense capital equipment is greatly reduced from 2021 onwards. Despite the guidelines I gave during my budget speech last year, the rate of decline has accelerated beyond our ability to control and absorb these ongoing cuts. Chair, in terms of audit qualifications, I've instructed the accounting officer and the chief of the SANDF to monitor the action plans developed by services and divisions and to curb recurring findings. These will be monitored by myself on a continuous basis during my monthly interactions with the management of the department. I am concerned about a matter involving a member related to the wearing of religious accoutrements. Now, I'm not sure about that name, whether I'm pronouncing it right, together with the official SANDF uniform. Against this background, I've requested the chief of the SANDF to find an amicable solution at the earliest possible time and report to me. Chairperson, the Reserve Force made an enormous contribution to the operational performance of the Defense Force during the last financial year by providing over 14,000 members for various tasks. In response to my directive in this House last year, we've developed a new Reserve Force service system that is now ready for implementation. A decision has been taken to hold a Reserve Force Indaba in September 2019. After a lengthy consultation process, I've now signed into effect the name changes of the Reserve Force units in the South African Army. These names now reflect a healthy balance of the South African military heritage. Chairperson, AMSCO has worked tirelessly with other stakeholders to establish the Defense Sector Charter for those wanting to participate in an inclusive and transformed defense industry, including military veterans and the youth. The Defense Industry Fund provides a financial solution to the challenges that most MMMEs face. The primary focus of AMSCO remains the delivery of complex acquisition and research and development expertise to the South African National Defense Force, including test, evaluation, and quality assurance. AMSCO ensures that young people, especially those from rural areas, are capacitated with science, engineering, and technology opportunities to succeed and be enabled to meet the global demands of the defense industry. Chair, the Department of Military Veterans has embarked on reviewing legislation and its efficacy in delivering effectively and efficiently to military veterans and their dependents. we've taken a decision to amend the Military Veterans Act to clarify the definition of a military veteran and to introduce regulations to address a means test. The Deputy Minister of Defense will assist me in this area as he has the institutional memory.
Honourable Minister,
The
your time is now expired.
Chairperson, thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Honourable Kaba.
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Minister, Honorable Deputy Minister, Honorable Members of Parliament, my predecessor, Mr. Motimela, Chief of the Defence Force and the Secretary of the Defence Force, guests in the gallery. The mission of the DOD, therefore, the mission of the DOD is to provide, manage, prepare, and employ defense capabilities commensurate with the needs of South Africa as regulated by the Constitution, national legislation, parliamentary, and the executive direction. The above is provided through the proper management, provision, preparedness, and employment of defense capabilities, which are in line with the domestic and global needs of South Africa. I now turn to the global needs of South Africa. I will deal with the domestic needs further down. In his State of the Nation address to this House, the President, consistent with the ANC policy, declared that the continent remains central to our foreign policy engagement as a republic. We have declared this before, that the peace and stability we enjoy in South Africa means nothing if there is no peace elsewhere in the continent. Consistent with this policy position, the SNDF supports government's foreign policy initiatives in the region and the continent to promote and maintain regional and continental peace, safety, stability, and security. Evidently, the SNDF has taken part in various large-scale UN and AU peacekeeping missions since 1994, numbering roughly 14. Most prominently was Burundi, the Comoros, Sudan, and the DRC. There was also the 1998 SADC peacekeeping operation in Lesotho. Currently, the SNDF is only involved in the DRC mission. South Africa is the 11th highest contributor to the UN's peacekeeping initiatives in Africa and ranks number 17 in the world. South Africa not only provides peacekeeping, but it also renders inter alia humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, post-conflict reconstruction initiatives, the deployment of military advisors and technical teams, and military assistance and training. This has bolstered our image as a contributor to peace and stability and supporting, advancing, and consolidating democracy on the continent. Peace, stability, and security are sine qua non for development to happen and flourish. However, the DOD could do more to promote these successes to the public. Our forces stand ready to provide mission-ready defense capabilities. We owe this to our men and women who put their lives on line in the defense of the nation and the territorial integrity of our borders, thereby upholding and defending the Constitution. They safeguard all the entry points, namely sea, air, and land borders. For effective protection, these borders must receive sustained guarding. The rise of terrorist attacks has necessitated the tightening of the nodal points, such as airports, seaports, IT systems, as well as these are likely to be exploited by those with criminal intents, namely terrorists and criminals. The Constitution mandates the SNDF to protect sovereignty and territorial integrity of the state. Only you have this mandate. We therefore look to you for this high calling. On a negative note, the funding cuts bring with them the decline in the South Africa's ability to contribute forces, partake in peacekeeping, and patrol of our borders. Our limited air support also means we can't extend beyond the reach of our military far beyond SADC. This may damage our reputation as a peacekeeping nation in the long run. The oversight visit to DRC by the two defense committees in March 2018, where South African peacekeepers were visited, highlighted some of the implications of the current declining defense budget. One particular challenge is the serviceability of key equipments. Despite these challenges, the SNDF manages to conduct peace support operations in support of the United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission in the DRC and the MONUSCO as part of MONUSCO's Force Intervention Brigade. This mission has been very successful in the defeat of the M23 rebels. These achievements, combined with the high quality of support by our peacekeepers in dealing with belligerents in the recent months in the eastern DRC, attest to our peacekeepers' professionalism and dedication. To further highlight this level of professional support, the nomination in 2019 of SA Air Force helicopter pilot and Lieutenant Colonel Stephen King for United Nations Exceptional Courage Medal serve as a clear indication of the caliber of support offered to the SNDF. You mentioned that, Minister. I now turn to the domestic needs. The SNDF has a long history of involvement in borderline guarding. For the most part, the borderline guarding has been under the control of the SNDF since 1994, with limited involvement between 2003 and 2009, when the function was allocated to the SAPS. Currently, the SNDF has 15 subunits deployed to patrol along 4471 kilometers land line borderline in South Africa. The consequences of the limited budget noted above and is illustrated by the minister further illustrates the need for more funding. We are deploying 15 subunits to border safeguarding instead of 22 subunits required to effectively safeguard our landline borders. The achievements of the current 15 deployed units, such as the confiscation of drugs, counterfeit products, and stolen vehicles, as well as the arrest of illegal immigrants, testify to the tremendous role the Defense Force play to address cross-border crime. These successes can exponentially be increased if more subunits can be deployed. Crucial to the enhancing of the SNDF border safeguarding capability is the need for force multiplying technology such as sensors and drones. The requirement for this intervention underlines the department's need to have the expanded budget. Given constraints in the defense funding, the acquisition of new military equipment has largely stagnated. In the late 1990s, South Africa managed to replace its aging fighter jet, frigate, and submarine capabilities, where the main beneficiaries were the South African Air Force and the South African Navy. However, the South African Army remains in need of urgent capital acquisition to replace much of its aging military capabilities. Central to this is Project Fiesta that aims to replace South Africa's Army aging fleet of infantry fighting vehicles with new vehicles. While the design of the vehicles and the initial production progressed well, significant delays as a result of capacity constraints at Denel have negatively affected the program. The delay is impacting negatively on the modernization program of the SNDF. All efforts by AMSCO, the DOD, and the Department of Trade and Industry to restore capacity at Denel is therefore supported. Furthermore, long-term planning to address the SA Air Force aging Oryx helicopter fleet, maritime aircraft at 35 Squadron, and challenges related to a strategic airlift capability should actually be addressed. I want to commend the Community Upliftment Program of the DAD. The program saw the SNDF Engineering Support Regiment building bridges, as mentioned, noticeably in the Eastern Cape, reviving the collapsed municipal sewer infrastructure in the Vaal, in direct response to the call by the President Ramaphosa to the Army to immerse itself in such development. South Africa takes its hat off as we congratulate the first 2 female commanders at 28 Squadron, Lieutenant Karel de Verge and Major Nandi Zama, who flew the infantry formation C-130 versatile aircraft as they salute the new Commander-in-Chief, President Ramaphosa. I also take this opportunity to congratulate the South Africa's first black female pilot, fighter pilot, Major Mandisa. This is a symbol of women's advancement as they break through the class ceiling. This inspires confidence in the service and defense of our nation. I have no doubt that the first Commander-in-Chief, President Nelson Mandela, is satisfied with progress.
Honourable Member,
Thank
your
you so
time
much.
is now expired.
The ANC supported.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honourable Marais.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chairperson, the constitutional mandate and obligations of the Department of Defence is given by Section 200, subsection 2, and I quote, "The primary object of the Defence Force is to defend and protect the Republic, its territorial integrity and its people according with the Constitution and the principles of international law regulating the use of force. Every priority and expense must be justified in terms of the compliance with this mandate." Chairperson, I want to pay tribute firstly to Dr. Galube, our Secretary of Defence, who will retire this year. Sir, we have had a very good working relationship, and we certainly wish you the best for your future. Secondly, to our brave soldiers and their command structures for their service, often under extreme and under-resourced conditions, especially those doing service on our borders, in the DRC and from this week in Cape Town. The latter under abnormal conditions and where the Minister of Police unwisely gave advance warning to the drug lords and gangs of their deployment. This deployment is an indictment against the police and confirms another failure by the ANC government. While the Army has done extremely well, given the short notice, this operation can only keep the lid on for a short period. Minister, up till today, our Portfolio Committee has not been informed by the President in terms of Section 203, subsections 1 and 3 of the Constitution. Chairperson, only this Parliament must find a lasting solution for the urban problems and not make it a defence responsibility. Last year, I stated that we are at a crossroads where hard and difficult decisions had to be made. Unfortunately, little has changed. This year, I must caution the Minister that the light in the end of the light in the tunnel is an oncoming runaway train and not the end of a tunnel. In nearly every aspect, the department has gone backwards. Based on submissions to the Portfolio Committee, we must be preparing for a day zero scenario. Comparable countries with a GDP growth rate of 3 to 4% spend 2 to 3% on their defence budget. South Africa has a GDP growth rate of around 1%, but only allocates 0.93% of its annual GDP to defence. We are approaching the cliff at an alarming pace. South Africa has deteriorated from a defence leader to a nearly negligent player. Our defence industry, a potentially significant contributor to economic growth and job creation, can no longer depend on the procurement by the SANDF. And do we see more and more South African designed and manufactured defence equipment being used by foreign nations? It is the ANC policies and leadership that has failed to create an environment conducive to investments. The failure of the ANC are responsible for the low GDP, low job creation, low defence industry developments, and growth in spending, and as well this 0.93% spending on defence priorities. This is not in the best interest of our citizens and our integrity in response to Section 200, subsection 2. The Defence Force requires around 80 billion rand to fund their current programs and projects, while only 50.5 billion was approved. This represents a nominal increase of 4.2% from the previous year, which is a decrease of 7.5% in real terms at the index of 12%. Over the past years, billions were transferred from the Special Defence account for the over-expenditure on human resources. It is envisaged that the over-expenditure in this year will be another 3 billion rand on HR costs. Contrary to the guidelines from the 2015 Defence Review and National Treasury, the Department will spend 60% of their budget on HR, 30% on operations, and leave only 10% for equipment. This is not enough to maintain the assets and equipment of the Defence Force, what to say procurement of new equipment. The SDA, which is to fund all capital equipment and hardware, are facing depletion without us having effective oversight over its spending. This must change. The current budget proposals indicate drastic cuts where operations are involved, for instance, flight and sea hours and the equipment procurement, new equipment procurement. This must be a red flag. Vice Admiral Slangwane has expressed his personal concern that vessel maintenance is challenging given the lack of budgeted support. Minister, this trend cannot proceed, and something must be done to prevent us losing what is left of our defence capability. The Defence Force cannot further be an employment safety net, but it must be transformed into a lean, mean fighting machine to deal with the defence challenges. Of the 75,000 staff, 50% are on contracts and only 37,000 are in the Army. However, the Infantry Capability Sub-Program has seen a real budget decrease of 10.21%. This is where our soldiers are coming from, who must protect our porous borders and operate in the DRC, and this week be deployed into Cape Town as well. The SANDF cannot survive and protect our country with an ever-aging staff component. A disproportionate amount is spent on the top command structure, which prevent rejuvenation and a young combat-ready army. This trend should not be allowed to continue. Although both the Department of the Defence Review and the National Treasury emphasize and support a smaller HR structure, will a younger staff component be much more affordable and make a big contribution to a lower spending. The SA Military Health Service is a huge cost to the Defence Force, while the 3 military hospitals cannot be fully equipped and funded. A conventional war is not expected, and must the logic of the military hospitals under the Defence Force be reconsidered, and should it be transferred to the Department of Health? Minister, you and I agree on the fundamentals for an effective Defence Force. The DA current replenishment of supplies, transport of equipment, and airlift of soldiers are inadequate. It's embarrassment when only 1 Oryx can be deployed to assist with the Mozambican floods, or currently where the Air Force had to borrow one from Overberg in support of Operation Prosper in Cape Town. Minister, a weak economy and a decreasing budget are realities over the medium term. The DA believe we can achieve more with the current budget through effective reprioritization with a focus on securing our borders and our sovereignty. We want to make the following proposals to you, Minister, which we believe will alleviate the budget pressures. Commission a revision of the 2015 Defence Review to conform to medium-term economic outlook and the medium-term defence challenges. Secure a monetary exit mechanism in favour of rejuvenation. Restructure the Defence Force based on foreseeable requirements in compliance with Section 200, with the emphasis on safeguarding our land and sea, support to our ocean and defence industries, as well as regional stability. Increase our border protection units to at least 22. Develop and implement a cyber tech strategy, which can be a force multiplier. Speedily acquire Air Force equipment, such as the C-130, maritime patrol aircraft, and the replacement of our reliable Oryx helicopters. If not, we are facing a grave threat to our sovereignty and our economy. Increase the support to our irreplaceable reserve force. Ensure improved logistical support to our soldiers. Liquidate non-essential assets in favour of the assets like the Badger, the IPV, and urgent airlift equipment. Ensure the finalizations of projects Byre Hotel and Hoefyster.
Honourable Member, your time has expired.
Chairperson, this budget is inadequate for the current defence structures, is not addressing our challenges, and is thus bad value for money. I thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honourable Matiase.
As Chair, in the mid-80s when the late President of the ANC, Oliver Tambo, called on the youth of the country to render the apartheid fascist regime ungovernable, the first response was to unleash the army and declare the state of emergency. And what we did was to emasculate the army, neutralize it, and force it to abandon their guns and instead bring bioscopes and things such as those. That was the way of dealing with the enemy and subject it to conditions of battle chosen by the people themselves. The deployment of the army in the Cape Town is a short measure that will not address the real cause of what leads to gangsterism. We must deal with the underlying socio-economic conditions of homelessness, landlessness, joblessness, and poverty in Khayelitsha, Philippi, Nyanga, Hanno Park, Manenberg, and other places to uproot the senseless killing of our people. The army is a short-term measure. Minister, you must understand that you won the battle and the war in the minds of the people first and foremost before you win it on the ground. But all of this, the fact is, Madam Minister, the Minister of the Police has announced deployment of soldiers without written approval from the President who commands soldiers. And now soldiers are waiting to receive written instruction that demonstrate lack of planning and coherent approach. You need intelligence, police and the army to approach this matter based on a practical and well thought out plan. Otherwise, we will run these townships and turn them into war zones without end in sight. In the immediacy of putting a proper perspective on the envisaged military defense policy and strategy on one hand, and military-industrial complex on the other, the EFF is called upon to set itself apart from the rest of other political, liberal, revisionist, narrow parliamentary parties which are represented here, which uses parliament for narrow and reactionary parliamentary maneuver. And this is how we are going to set ourselves
The
apart.
Honourable Member.
Chairperson,
Honourable Member, please take your seat.
can a member take a question?
Let's ascertain first.
I've got no
Honourable
time.
Member, are you ready to take the question?
This is not a kindergarten.
Who is the
I've got no time
CIC?
for it.
Oh, Honourable
no time
Member,
to
don't
play.
do that. He's not ready. Continue, Member.
In your 2018 budget speech, Minister, among other things you said was that, I quote, South Africa is a peaceful country that lives in harmony with their neighbors. You further said that due to unpredictable geopolitical realities in SADC and in the continent, the country requires to maintain a credible military force as a deterrent, close quotes. For your account, you further said some of the SADC countries are injecting resources to build a military capacity through strategic acquisition. Conversely, South Africa is in a path of reduced defense expenditure, close quotes. Why do you have to reduce defense expenditure when we know that the threat to our sovereignty is permanently lacking? When you know that the real threat is not within but outside, when you know that the real threat, which is imminent, is a threat of imperialism across Lubatsi, the US High Command, and the military base in Gaborone, and you say nothing about that. Are you friends with imperialists? You becoming speechless on this real threat is telling. It is telling because you are not committed to combating the threat of imperialism. Yours is a contradiction of the highest order and ought to be exposed for what it is. And this is what it is, and for which we raise pertinent issues of relevance to this budget vote debate. Comparatively, South Africa's budget allocation and expenditure over the years has been significantly declining and fell below the BRICS countries, which leave South Africa lagging behind and therefore exposing our defense capability and aspiration. Secondly, on comparative analysis, the defense and military veterans budget and expenditure per GDP constitute 1.1 percentage point of its annual fund, 48.2 billion, as against 15% percentage point of 213 billion allocated to education, for example, without devaluing the critical role of education as it contributes to socio-economic well-being of the nation, which is also correctly priced at 15% of the total expenditure to the GDP. However, Madam Minister, we decry a 1% allocation to defense and military veterans. Give soldiers more guns and not sticks. We are told that the military equipment and armaments are obsolete and no longer useful, whereas government spend 30 billion rands for strategic defense acquisition in 1999. An arrangement through which the country was exposed to corruption and state capture as early as then at an industrial scale. We demand more transparency on the so-called special defense account, which is nothing else but a slush fund whose purpose and utilization is shrouded in secrecy. We demand full disclosure of this account. A strategic asset such as AMSCO, which could be strategically repositioned and to be recapitalized in order to play a role in massive industrialization and manufacturing of both military and commercial products and commodities, is reduced to a tender committee of corrupt politicians and securocrats. We call for increased budget allocation and expenditure for the Department of Defense and military veterans, for improved service and working conditions for soldiers engaged in the national duty, for better care for struggles, veterans, widows, and children, for the repositioning and recapitalization of AMSCO to meet industrialization aspirations, and for SHO South Africa. EFF proposes a strategic paradigm shift from colonial and apartheid militarism to democratic and people-centered civil military guided by the philosophy and the doctrine of the revolutionary consciousness and the people's government, where the military and the people are one in the battle against alcohol, drugs, substance abuse, crime, and all social ills. We call for a review of the defense strategy, which shall ensure resources that guarantee the uninterrupted defense of the national and territorial sovereignty against imperialist aggression.
Honorable Member Matthias.
And until these demands are met,
Honorable
the
Member
EFF
Matthias,
rejects this budget.
your time has
vote.
expired.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I now call on the Honorable Tebekulu.
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Minister, I wish to commend the Minister in allowing for the deployment of the SNDF to gang areas and around Cape Town. But I also believe that should this intervention work, we need to emulate this model across the board as we arrest crimes in other parts of the country. The use of military in this manner is a workable solution to assist the police in maintaining public order. We cannot have funerals every weekend in our communities. Chairperson, our ports of entry in our country must be strengthened to arrest cross-border crime, syndicates, hijackings, human trafficking, and the poaching of rhino. Kuyathokozisa nokho-ke ukuzwa umhlonishwa ongqongqoshe esuka lapha eqinisekisa ukuthi umbutho uphakiwe uba uphume uyosiza uwelekelela nokulwa nenhlelo zobugebengu ezithanda ukuhlasela izwe lakithi. Nokho ngeshwa inkinga isekhona emngceleni weSouth Africa neMozambique kule ngxenye engezansi ngakoKosi Bay ngwavuma. La khona namanje iseqa khona imoto imngcele mase zingala phakathi eMozambique singakwazi ukulandeka ngenxa yokungabikho kokusebenzisana phakathi eSouth Africa neMozambique ukunqanda lobugebengu obenzakalayo. Ngale amasosha khona ingxenye yokulekelela igilamkhuba lezinqabe kwenziwa lomkhuba wokubuya kwemoto. Chairperson, we believe that our men and women in uniform is best placed to assist in combating crime, as they are not actively busy in combat. But we understand that our troops in peacekeeping have an important role to play in ensuring that our human rights foreign policy is maintained. Where we can best use our resources, we need to maximize on that. Chairperson, furthermore, it is worrying that our military veterans continue to be ill-treated and some are not receiving their benefits as was agreed to by the government administration. We must address this issue swiftly. It is important that all veterans are treated equally across the country. The private MK military veterans of the ANC must be assisted by their mother organization. In terms of alleged corruption activities within the ranks of the SNDF is of grave concern to the IFP. Decline within our defense force and overall image of the SNDF is essential. We cannot have a situation whereby anyone within the ranks of our armed forces are becoming involved in criminal activities, corrupt activities, and doing business with family members, friends, and comrades. This must be reined in. Military discipline is foundational and key in any successful defense force. It is a culture that must be bred and enforced with zero tolerance. Chairperson, our SANDF has been in the news quite a lot over the past few months, from the very first female fighter jet pilot, which we congratulate on her achievement, to some less congratulate reports. These reports include cases of discrimination of dress codes against some soldiers, bribes being paid to place individuals in the voluntary service of the defense force, and shootout with foreign government border officials. Further to this, we have seen military exercises take place in the protected waters of False Bay along the Cape Coast, which endanger marine wildlife. We need to make use of the budget presented in not only managing the SNDF, but managing the reputation of our defense force. We need to restore trust, integrity, and confidence that our men and women who serve in the duty of our country do so in a manner which all South Africans can be proud of. In line with constructive governance, the IFP will support this budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I now call on the Honorable Groenewald. Over to you, sir.
Voorzitter, the Honorable President quoted, and I don't think I've heard it incorrectly, from the interim constitution on the constitutional obligation on the South African National Defence Force, and that is to defend our integrity. Well, we know Section 200 of our Constitution is quite clear. To ensure that our integrity is protected. But everybody knows, Chair, that there is no international threat, an external threat against South Africa. But, Honourable Minister, there is an internal threat in the National Defence Force. And the reason why I say that is that the Honourable Minister will know, since 2004, in every budget vote in this House, I've mentioned the inadequate funds in the budget for the National Defence Force. Since 2004, because that is when it started. And I still think that we have inadequate funds in our budget. But I'm rethinking. Because I can't understand that if I read in newspapers that a senior officer can spend hundreds of millions rand in corruption on tenders, where he first had an affair with another man's wife, then in the end married her, and using taxpayers' money to enrich themselves. the internal threat of corruption. I can say in a lighter note, I suppose that's the most expensive lobola ever paid with taxpayers' money. But Honourable Minister, that is the threat. And we cannot go to the taxpayers and say we want more money because we have inadequate budget for Defence Force, while the corruption of hundreds of millions is actually taking place in the National Defence Force. Ek wil ook verwys na die ontplooiing van die weermag saam met die polisie in die Wes-Kaap. Nou dit is so. Artikel 201 van die grondwet sê dat die president van die land kan dit magtig, maar dit sê ook dat die president die parlement in kennis moet stel. Ons het vanmiddag die presidensiële begrotingsdebat en ek glo hy gaan dan vir ons sê hoeveel soldate ontplooi gaan word, waar hulle gaan ontplooi word, die rede hoekom hulle ontplooi gaan word en vir hoe lank hulle ontplooi gaan word. Ek is op rekord, voorsitter, wat ek sê dat ja, die weermag kan aangewend word, maar dit is nie wenslik nie. En die blote feit dat dit nou gebeur, is eintlik 'n erkenning van die ANC-regering wat sê misdaad, spesifiek in die Wes-Kaap, is buite beheer en die polisie kan dit nie meer beheer nie. Maar ek het 'n groot bekommernis. En daardie bekommernis is ons soldate behoorlik opgelei om te verseker dat hulle weet hoe om sulke situasies te hanteer. Maar is die polisie van Suid-Afrika ook behoorlik opgelei om te weet hoe om saam te werk met die Suid-Afrikaanse nasionale weermag? Ek dink nie so nie. Want op die oomblik het jy 'n botsing van egos binne in die polisie self. Ons sien dat as ons gaan kyk na die teenbende eenheid, dan is daar die bevelstruktuur van daardie eenheid wanneer dit by operasies kom om uit te voer teen die bendes, dat daar afgunstigheid is en dat dan sulke operasies misluk en polisielede doodgeskiet word. My vraag is, gaan ons nog daardie stryd van egos hê in die weermag, want dit is 'n oeroue probleem, dat sodra die weermag saam met die polisie moet begin funksioneer en opereer, dan is daar meningsverskille oor wie het bevel oor wie en wie het beheer oor u. Dit is so, dit is eintlik baie duidelik, maar daardie interne spanning bekommer my en die vraag is op die einde van die dag, gaan ons hierdie bende geweld kan wen? Ek is bekommerd dat ons dit nie gaan regkry nie. Ek dank u.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member Groenewald. I now call on the Honorable Deputy Minister of Defence and Military Veterans. Over to you, Deputy Minister.
Honorable House Chair, thank you very much. Honorable Minister of Defence and Military Veterans, esteemed members of the House, Noluthando, alias Agnes Ncwana, to whose memory I wish to dedicate my remarks this morning in this budget debate, was a military veteran who served both as a member of the celebrated June 16 detachment of the erstwhile military wing of the ANC, Umkhonto weSizwe, and in our post-1994 National Defence Force as well. Agnes was among the first young females to leave the country from Cape Town's Black Townships a few weeks after the 1976 uprisings. Even after retirement, the bond and respect she had for those who were soldiers led her to work as an auxiliary in the Department of Military Veterans, assisting military veterans to access healthcare services at our military hospitals. She was a darling of many military veterans of advanced age in this community. She was their dependable health worker who executed her modest duties with passion and was always there each time any one of them was in dire straits. Agnes Ngwana died as she lived, a fighter, a brave woman, a caregiver, a militant, a patriot and firm corruption buster. Her assassins will not stop the commitment. And now that she is no more, the obligation we have to realize a fully functional Department of Military Veterans with provincial offices which are adequately staffed, a Department of Military Veterans which has policies and standing operating procedures on all the benefits and services which must be provided to military veterans, a Department of Military Veterans whose provincial offices are sufficiently publicized and have service-level agreements with other relevant line function sister departments to deliver these services, a Department of Military Veterans which at the end restores the dignity of military veterans, and a Department of Military Veterans which addresses military veterans' needs with compassion and empowers them to be self-sufficient and to contribute their talents again to nation building. House Chairperson Comrade Agnes' last wish was for mourners at her funeral not to put on military uniform. In spite of having spent her entire life serving the military, she wanted to depart from our midst free of images of war and conflict because she fought for peace and she experienced the misery of war. Chairperson, it is common knowledge that over the past 25 years, the locus of security in our country has understandably shifted from defense to justice, intelligence, and policing. The defense function has suffered death by 1,000 cuts, to use Gavin Cattrall's expression. Hollowing out our defense is more a function of a policy drift engendered by politically correct but short-term popular considerations rather than rational decision-making and a long-term consideration of the challenges we face. On the other hand, the continuous decline of our military capability over this period is such that we are now confronted by an irreversible loss of capabilities and a defense force which cannot fully meet its constitutional mandate. It is disconcerting that to restore the defense capabilities South Africa had 25 years ago, we need an injection of over 34 billion to the current defense budget. Simply put, our country is underinsured. Lest we forget, the national political project to build a prosperous, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, and open society is taking place in a world where others still view us with skepticism. The above conjuncture, as the minister said, evidently calls for a dialogue over the country's defense function. However, another defense review is considered inopportune. Defense reviews have a reputation of being costly, convoluted, and time-consuming. The ministry is evaluating the scope of issues to be addressed and the best way of handling them. These include, but it's not limited to the following: one, an overhaul of the force design to enable training and equipping of the South African National Defense Force in a more direct manner for a multiplicity of its goals. Two, to design a plan on the basis of the resource levels we realistically have at our disposal. Three, to effect a paradigm shift from previous fundamentals which were informed by the security threat as perceived in the apartheid days, including our defense infrastructure footprint. And lastly, the one force concept and the place of the reserves today and their peculiarities. When our defense establishment was constituted following the integration process in 1994, we took a view that to maintain an appropriate military capability for the country in an affordable economic way, our defense force must be structured and maintained on the basis of the one force concept. It was going to assist in cutting down the regular force, which would be complemented by a professional reserve force. Among the things we need to do is to ensure that the new military strategy enables the South African National Defense Force to develop combat support, and combat service support capabilities, both in the reserves and the regular, that conform to the posted feed systems approach. On this occasion last year, the Minister highlighted the following ongoing priorities in and around the reserves, which are being worked upon to strengthen the South African National Defense Force. The maximizing the combat capability of the South African National Defense Force by staffing the combat units with existing young, healthy, and fit soldiers. This will improve both the average staffing of units as well as the average age of those units, ensuring the retention of technical, medical, and other scarce skills, driving career management and succession planning in pursuit of young, professionalized, and skilled defense force. Deficiencies and corruption in the current reserve force systems must be addressed. Overhauling the entire reserve force service system is also a priority. Honorable members, the Department of Military Veterans has also made modest strides in its work to improve the lives of military veterans. Over the past financial year, 2018-2019, the department managed to assist military veterans with mandatory benefits. 10,700 military veterans and their dependents received bursaries. 1,000 military veterans received newly built houses. 17,000 were assisted with health services, and 3 memorial sites were erected in honor of military veterans. The Department of Military Veterans has increasingly encountered challenges emanating from unintended consequences of its policy articulation. These deficiencies naturally have found their way into the current legislation. This has necessitated the need for the Military Veterans Act to be amended. Among the issues to be ventilated is the definition of beneficiaries of the benefits and services rolled out by the Department of Military Veterans. In its origins, the department was intended to look after yesterday's freedom fighters, those who were left destitute by their participation in the People's War of Liberation in South Africa. This confusion is laid bare by the mission statement of the department, which talks about, and I quote, the restoration of dignity and appreciation of the contribution of military veterans to our freedom and nation building. And may I also add to say, not all military veterans who are recipients of these benefits today were in any way or by any stretch of the imagination involved in fighting for freedom and nation building. That notwithstanding, governments in many parts of the world do look after ex-soldiers, of course, and practices differ. Furthermore, in dispensing these benefits, from experience, there is a need for the regulations to be fine-tuned with a view to improve equity, fairness, and transparency. All the above and more must also find clarity in a white paper. Honorable members, one of the biggest challenges of the Department of Military Veterans is the widespread absence of policies governing the different benefits, their standard operating procedures, and their delivery modalities. This is further work for the administration of our department in this financial year, and we believe we can overcome. The department still has a modest post establishment of 169 posts and 70 contract workers. This is another objective inhibiting factor that we need to address. 662.6 million has been allocated for the business of this department. A lot can be achieved with this allocation. At the beginning, there was only 20 million for the Department of Military Veterans for 3 consecutive years. As I conclude, allow me from this podium to express my warm personal appreciation of the talents of Dr. Kulube, our Secretary of Defense, as he contemplates taking final leave from the Department of Defense. The task of nation building continues, and we all believe we are not seeing you, Dr. Kulube, for the last time in leadership duties in our country. I wish to express my gratitude and confidence in the acting DG of the Department of Military Veterans, General Mukwebi, retired, who has the benefit of exposure to the origins of some of the views which inform the framework of the Department of Military Veterans in policy and in law. My appreciation also goes to the management of the Department of Military Veterans, the chair of the Portfolio Committee and its members, and Minister, my thanks to you for your cordial guidance of the work of the ministry. May I also advise that those who are clamoring for a return to the level of spending that this country had in years before, they must not do that not appreciating the need to actually have a paradigm shift. Because the South African Defense Force, SADF, was a defense establishment that was built to fight a war against insurgents. It was aimed at making sure that the country, from a security point, can respond to a threat that they perceived will come from the northern borders of this country, from Black Africa. That is why all the important infrastructure footprint of the Defense Force today is located to the northern regions of our country. The coastal line of our country is totally naked. But it has not always been the case. During the time of the Union Defense Force, before the National Party in the early 60s decided to prepare for the war against insurgents, the South African Defense Force had bases and even formations of Marine Corps because it took maritime security serious. It is the National Party that turned South Africa's Defense Force around. So when we talk about preparing South Africa for the threat into the future, the resources that we want to see released to the Defense Force should not be according to the old paradigm.
Unfortunately, your time has expired. Thank you very much, the Deputy Minister. Honorable Holomisa, over to you.
Chairperson, Honorable Minister and Honorable Members, the UDM supports this budget. Let me start off by expressing my thanks to the Defense Force leadership during the time I spent serving on the Defense Force Service Commission. My term and some of my colleagues ended last year, but I will continue the work as I will be serving on the Defense Force Portfolio Committee for the first time. Unfortunately, the department has been moving at a snail's pace and it appears as if the Defense Force Commission's findings and recommendations were either ignored or undermined for some or other reasons. I therefore look forward to play a role in working towards the implementation of some of the Commission's findings and recommendations. Honorable members, an issue the Commission identified was the exit strategy for those ready to retire. This is compounded when government extends the services for those at command level. The ramification is that when the top structure stagnates, the upward mobility of lower structures are adversely affected. This affects morale of the troops. The Defense Force promotion policy also needs attention. Many Defense Force men and women who came from various former armies retained their force numbers. There was no uniformity, and it led to discrimination in promotions. Honorable Minister, the powers of the Commission itself is an issue. You promised in last year's budget address that this matter was receiving attention. Kindly give us a full briefing on progress made. We also need to hear how far the Secretary for Defense has gone in engaging Treasury regarding the implementation of the Defense Review. My other experience whilst moving through the various units and talking to officers was the lack of speed in decision-making. 9 out of 10 times, soldiers are told that such matters are lying in the office of the Secretary of Defense. This embarrasses
Honorable
SANDF commanders and is counter to military culture. Speed is the essence in the army.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The Honorable Member Bukes.
Honorable House Chair, Honorable Minister, Honorable Deputy Minister, Honorable Members in the House, Chief Whip of the Majority Party, my comrades, guests in the gallery. The Department of Military Veterans derives its mandate from the Military Veterans Act, which required it to provide national policy and standards for socio-economic support to the military veterans and their dependents, including benefits and entitlements to realize a dignified, unified, empowered, and self-sufficient military veterans community. With the support from the department, more than 17,000 military veterans have been authorized for access to healthcare services across the country. The department can improve access through strengthening of intergovernmental relations and the allocation of a sufficient budget. Achtbare voorsitter, ons het die samewerking van provinsiale regering sowel as munisipaliteite nodig om dit 'n werklikheid te maak. We must focus on alignment and coordination across all spheres of government and entities. Engagement with provincial government through the offices of the premiers and SALGA can assist in fast-tracking veterans' desks in municipality. Establishment of those desks will ensure that the relevant information, important information pertaining veterans can be accessed easily and shared with the veterans and their families. This will also assist in the speedy completion of the database as well as the monitoring of the spending budget. The department will contribute to a number of outcomes in both the NDP and the medium-term strategic framework through improving its services. Honorable Chairperson, my focus will be on the socio-economic support. A certain amount is allocated for heritage, memorials, burials, and honoring military veterans. I am proud to be part of the African National Congress, a movement striving to change in ensuring dignified lifestyle, a safe and human healthy environment for military veterans. Recognizing the role military veterans played in the democratization of South Africa ties into the National Development Plan's aspirations to realize a developmental, capable, and ethical state that treats its citizens with dignity. Honorable Chairperson, acknowledging military veterans for their contribution deepen social cohesion and national unity. Honorable Chairperson, I want to urge the department to look into the MOU with the Department of Human Settlements to speed up the process of building houses and to monitor the implementation thereof. The department plans to provide 7,466 education and training bursaries to military veterans and their dependents in each year over the medium term. Dit is weer eens 'n versekering dat ons as die African National Congress baie ernstig is oor die bemagtiging van ons jeugdiges. Ek wil egter die departement aanmoedig om deur middel van bewusmakingsprogramme, veral in ons afgeleë plattelandse gebiede, ons gemeenskappe in te lig oor die voordele van hierdie spesifieke program. Honorable Chairperson, the Castle Control Board, which is a Schedule 3A public entity, is responsible for the overall management, maintenance, and promotion of the Castle of Good Hope as a heritage site and tourist attraction. In terms of the legislative mandate, the organization is expected to provide a range of public services on behalf of the Department of Military Veterans. The board mission is to be a service-oriented public entity, striving to create an environment where national pride serves to build an international known and recognized cultural and heritage brand for Ubuntu, dialogue, nation building, and human rights recognition. The vision, Honorable Chairperson, is to be a globally significant, truly accessible center that displays South Africa's shared history. The objectives in the Act tie in with the NDP in the same way like the promotion of tourism, because the NDP is clear on the strategic role of tourism as a driver for economic growth and job creation. My question or concern, however, Honorable Chairperson, is, doen ons genoeg? Hoekom is die kasteel van Goeie Hoop nog onbekend aan sommige gemeenskappe, veral in ons afgeleë gebiede? Agbare voorsitter, hoekom kan ons nie enige kind op straat in die omliggende gebiede vra oor die geskiedenis van die kasteel nie? Miskien is ek verkeerd of oningelig. Die implementering in ons agtergeblewe skole is nodig om ons jonger generasie al waarde te laat besef om sodoende minderwaardigheid hok te slaan. Het ons onsself al afgevra waaroor hierdie bende geweld gaan? Is dit nie miskien 'n soeke na identiteit nie? In plaas van mekaar te blameer, praat ons verby mekaar, verby die werklike probleem wat wie veroorsaak het. Hoekom wanneer ons oplees oor die kasteel, word daar nog gepraat oor Isbrand, Goski en Barnard? But they refer to our ancestors as Khoi burgers and people that came with the ships. Are we not worth mentioning? Through promoting and advocating, through cherishing, we will revive and restore our dignity. We can reroute the negative energy for positive outcomes and dissolve the aggression. All of us here have our own heritage. Let us take ownership, but respect each other. One great Nama Gaup Simon Cooper said, and I quote, "Big things can happen when a small number of people stand together. We will survive and never surrender." I close quote. Honorable Chairperson, we will fail ourselves, our community and our organization if we do not take this and bring our side to ensure that the next generation do not experience what we did. Someone once
Honorable Member Bukes, your time has expired.
That's it.
Yes.
Can star are
Thank you
supportable.
very much. I call on the Honorable Imam.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair, Minister, Deputy Minister, my colleagues and members in the gallery. The National Freedom Party notes the report and also equally supports the report of the Department of Defence and Military Veterans tabled here today. Honourable Chairperson, allow me to start by paying tribute to the late General Peterser, commander of the Khoi and San Self-Defense Unit, who died last week at his home in Swellendam. May his soul rest in peace, and also allow me to extend our condolences to his family and friends. Having said that, Minister, it is my understanding that the matter of the Khoi and San Self-Defense Unit, the Cape Corps and things has not been finalized. There has been negotiation, and I hope that at some stage we can deal with the matter appropriately. I don't want to dwell too much into the challenges that the department is facing, because I think many of my colleagues have done that, particularly with the overspending, the underspending, and the limited resources you've got. But what I think is very, very clear, that with the limited resources that the department has, you're clearly not in a position to fulfill your mandate as required by the Constitution. And I think it's a very, very important matter that we need to look at. I want to agree to a certain extent to what Honourable Kroneval said, that there is presently no external threat or risk to South Africa. But let us not forget there's a greater risk internally. And yes, whilst there might not have been enough consultation between the South African Police Services and the South African Defence, what is very clear is this, that the department has an equal responsibility of protecting its people inside the country, like it has in protecting the interests of the country from external forces. And there is no doubt about it, there is a serious challenge that we face as a result of the socio-economic conditions in South Africa. So any support, and the National Freedom Party has been calling for this for many years, that the South African police services are not in a position to be able to deal with the challenges of crime in South Africa on its own. So any assistance from the South African National Defence, in fact, will go a long way in dealing with crime and criminality in South Africa. So we are urging you to work together with the South African Police Force. Of course, you must comply with your obligations and the rule of law, but again, you need to provide them with that support so that they can be able to alleviate crime in South Africa. Now, the other issue that we have is, and what we find is that border control. We believe there again, the Defence Force, and I think you are doing some work to an extent, but a lot more, because our borders, our porous borders, it leaves a lot to be desired. And a lot of our challenges that we face in the country is as a result of the poor management on the borders. So we're calling on the department to assist again and work together with the Home Affairs and the other relevant departments to assist us. The National Freedom Party supports the report tabled here.
Thank you very much. I call on the Honourable J.J. Make.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. The most important responsibility of a government is to secure its territory and ensure the safety of its citizens. Without this prevalent condition, it is unlikely that the nation state will develop and mature, and the constitutional elements of human security will definitely be in danger. I think a lot has been said about the budget. Then maybe we can talk about something else. I think before we can talk about the budget of this department, we need to try and understand the department we are talking about. What actually are the functions and objectives of this department? Surely most of us just see the uniform and not the people or the human beings that are wearing this uniform. Don't we maybe need to look beyond this uniform and see these people? Who are they? Are they simply instruments, robots, machines, objects with no parents, wives, husbands, children, and friends? They are surely one of our own. Do we need to ask ourselves why the military needs to have its own police, its own hospitals, its own pension scheme, and its own intelligence?
When things get bad, all we say, call the army. Theirs is not to ask the reason why. Theirs is just to do and die. Wouldn't it then be appropriate, or at least let them have a bit of a say, just a bit of a say in the allocation of their own budget? Only because theirs is just to do and die. Who then determines the budget of this department? Are civilians qualified to determine the budget of these people in uniform? Madam Chairperson, to go back to my earlier point, why they have their own hospital, court system, and their intelligence. The type of wounds they sustain are so horrifying that maybe are not to be seen by ordinary citizens. Because they are carrying automatic weapons, bombs, etc., and if they use them against their own, only a military tribunal will understand the extent of the crime. Their own intelligence division, I think that is obvious. You can imagine an Air Force pilot who drops a bomb that annihilates a whole village. A civilian magistrate will have a problem in analyzing the crime. The question then still remains, who then must determine the budget of this department? That is the reason why in a security cluster, it becomes a bit difficult even for the opposition to grandstand, as we all agree across party lines about the defense and security of the Republic. They are forced to be realistic. If there's an attack in the country, we civilians will ask, why didn't they see it coming? And those responsible within the defense might even be court-martialed. What about the budget? Must they cut budget on training of their intakes? Is the defense supposed to send poorly trained soldiers to battle? That is equivalent to leading them to their death. The Department of Military Veterans derives its mandate from the Military Veterans Act, which requires it to provide national policy and standards and socio-economic support to military veterans and their dependents. The Defense Department is instead faced with a situation of a diminishing budget. How then is it expected to fulfill this mandate? This mandate is established exactly because we are here dealing with a unique department that deals with unique people, as I explained above. Can we safely say that this mandate is being implemented? Instead of houses being built for veterans, the number of houses which are supposed to be built are decreased. The number of former liberation fighters is not increasing. Well, rather, it is not supposed to increase. They are growing old, which means that if you don't build them houses now, organize their medical aid now, they will be dead before this can be done. Dying an undignified death after they have sacrificed so much for the liberation of this country. We are therefore strongly, very, very strongly recommending that there be no reduction in the defense budget. We also recommend that the amendments to Military Veterans Act be a priority in order to correct some of the abnormalities that are currently happening within the Department of Military Veterans. As the Minister said before me, that in support of the National Development Plan, Vision 2030, South Africa's security policy objectives at an international level include the defense of the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the political independence of South African state, and the promotion of regional security. South Africa's national security objectives continue to encompass the consolidation of democracy, the achievement of a substantial reduction in crime, violence, and political instability. Security and development are both inextricably linked and mutually reinforcing, highlighting the role of South African security sector, and in particular the defense function has to play in creating and development.
Honourable Member, your time is expired.
The ANC surely support the budget vote.
Thank you. The next speaker is Honourable Nyonso.
Chairperson, PAC congratulates the members of SANDF who are playing a pivotal role in peace and safety operations in other parts of Africa. Having said that, it is difficult to congratulate you when the safety and security of the citizens is concerned. The continued murderers of our people with little or no action from the government is highly disturbing. Honourable Minister, the PAC maintains that this budget is not sufficient to address its vote purposes. Continued budget cuts, with the Secretary of Defence lamented as a disaster with Mail and Guardian, are an insult to the already suffering soldiers who are expected, without question, to lay down their lives in defence of the nation. It cannot be allowed that this pivotal National Security Department can be in a continued state of decline. How do you propose to continue with the international peacekeeping duties and also ensure the internal operations are catered for whilst cutting budget? As for the position of military veterans, the majority have been reduced to a position of being tramps and beggars who have become victims of the liberation they were fighting for. Contrary to what you say on paper, there is little that is being done to improve their quality of life and that of their dependents. Some, Honourable Minister, are receiving paupers' burials whilst having been on the list to be verified. Umama uMatsheni waseMthatha waba ne-stroke after umyeni wakhe bebenefita kwi-beneficiary, yena waze akayifumana ii-benefits zakhe, and she is threatening us with suicide. PAC reject this budget.
The next speaker is the Honourable Hendricks. Order, honourable members.
Honourable Chairman, our Defence Force has done amazing work outside South Africa, and they will do amazing work on the Cape Flats, even addressing some of the socio-economic challenges. Al-Jamaa supports the budget and the call by the Minister for more financial support. Honourable Minister, thank you for looking at the neglect of benefits of our non-statutory forces who are also military veterans. Settle the definition on Mandela Day. It can only take 67 minutes. We are battle ready, we must be definition ready. We can't delay and neglect the military veterans because we can't arrive at a definition. My community is in shock after the court-martial of one of its heroes, who is a member of the Defence Force for a decade. We are comforted by your swift action, Honourable Minister. Honourable Chief of the Defence Force, win back the hearts of the Muslim community and also do so on Mandela Day with a further word of comfort. It will also take you 67 minutes. My mom ran 2 safe houses with me at the site 10 years old during the treason and Rhodia trial in District 6, mainly for Gogas who visited their sons on Robben Island. She survived harsh interrogation at the age of 65, 25 years later, in the heydays of the UDF, and she refused to remove her doekie. she would not have survived the disrespect for a fundamental pillar of her faith after liberation. Honorable Marais reminded the Defence Force to protect the territorial integrity of South Africa. We have lost parts of the country to criminals, according to the Minister of Police. We need back on the Cape Flats so that our Honorable President and your Commander-in-Chief can rule the whole country and not only part of the country. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Shelembe.
Chairperson, firstly, Democratic Alliance notes a budget allocation to the Department of Military Veterans of 662.6 million, which is more than the 627.1 million allocation of 2018 and 2019. The allocation of 87.5 million of sub-program 2 to deal with healthcare and well-being support is questionable. How is it going to be spent, since the Department of Military Veterans has clearly stated that the government has prioritized the provision of healthcare services to the citizens of this country? But there are still challenges with regard to the model being used, which is not viable and user-friendly. While the Department of Military Veterans plans to improve their access to benefits through other models of service delivery, such as intergovernmental relations where access to health care occurs via other organs of states, the question remains, what other models of delivery will be used and what will be the cost implications? Internationally, it is standard principle that Defence Force members who risk physical, psychological, and social exposure, injuries, or death in service of their country depend on the dedicated health services that is guaranteed, comprehensive, and available anywhere at all times. This international norm places a moral obligation to our country to guarantee provision of military health services that render continuous operational health. The ANC must be ashamed that it is still failing to fulfill its obligation in this regard. One of the failures of the department under the ANC government is the verification and finalization of the military veterans database, which is required in terms of Section 1 of the Military Veterans Act, number 18 of 2011. This act qualifies veterans for access to these benefits. It concerns us that the department had reported that there are persons on the database that should not be there, and surprisingly, the department has decreased the allocation on sub-program 1, which deals with this very database and benefits management, by 900,000. The department in its 2019 and 20 annual performance plan has shown that more than 40,000 military veterans have not updated their allocations since their inclusion on the database. This makes geolocation mapping difficult for planning of their benefits. The DA is also concerned about the ANC government's failure to sort out the lack of leadership instability in the department, as well as the filling of vacancies as per staff requirements, which will further delay the finalization of the military veterans database. The department has an approved staff establishment of 169 permanent positions, but only 138 that are filled. Ministers, stand up and sort out the leadership instability in this department. Your delay to appoint the Director General is failing the department. Again, it is noted with great concern that since the establishment of the Department of Military Veterans in 2011, no progress has been made on the poor performance on transport and pensions. The ANC must be held accountable for this, as it has failed to appoint the Director General in this department. We cannot continue allow conditions where life difficult for our military veterans who have played a vital role in protecting our country and the economy. The DA is committed to building a South Africa where our military veterans are treated with dignity. Thank you.
The next speaker is the Honourable Mutle.
Thank you, House Chair, Honourable Minister, Deputy Minister, honourable members, and fellow South African. Honorable Chair, we should not be worried when messengers of white buses comes here and critique that which is meant to transform the lives of our people. They wasted their time when the likes of J.J. Make and other veterans were fighting for the freedom of this country, and they want to be brave as messengers here today. Honorable Chair, as I take the stand in this podium to break my virginity insofar as the 6th Parliament debate is concerned, I wish to take this opportunity to thank the ANC and the people of this country for the opportunity they have given us to represent the people of this country. We dare not fail them. Before I proceed, Chair, we wish to extend our heartfelt condolences and sympathy to the family and friends of General Ike Mapoto, a tireless advocate of human rights and a real freedom fighter, not these ones of today. A pioneer of Umkhondo Wesizwe, may his soul rest in peace. We, as the African National Congress, we also wish to express our concern about the continuous decrease in the defense budget. We acknowledge the financial constraint under which the Department of Defense is operating under. For this reason, we urge the department to speed up the development of a funding model to allow our committee to engage with it so that we can assist where possible. Honorable Chair, it is important to note that the 54th National Conference of the ANC acknowledged the realities of the work of the security cluster. And it said, it identified clearly that the work of the cluster is labor intensive, and therefore the mechanical reduction in the budget and personnel will invariably weaken its capacity and capability to reassert the authority of the state, to protect the territorial integrity of the Republic and ensure that all South Africans feel safe. Chairperson, it is on that basis that we wish to remind the executive and the Minister of Finance in particular about the resolution taken by the 54th National Conference, and I quote, "Government should allocate adequate additional financial resources to security cluster to effectively deal with the territorial integrity of the country," close quote. It is our basis for condemnation of the shrinking budget of the defense. It can't continue to be correct that the funding of the defense budget is less than 1% of the GDP, making it lowest in the SADC region. Most countries, and NATO ones as well, use 2% of GDP, and some countries in Africa are even higher. The advice to South African National Defense Force was that the budget should never be kept under 1.8% of the GDP, and this is worrisome. Honorable Chair, one of the entities of the Department of Defense is the Military Ombudsman. The Office of the Military Ombuds is a critical mechanism of civil oversight. On the review of complaints, the Military Ombuds recommendation give corrective direction to the Defense Force. Of the 525 complaints before the Military Ombuds, we are glad to report to this House that a total of 246 have been finalized. The term of this body, Military Ombudsman, has come to an end, and we like to wish Lieutenant General T.T. Matanzima well, and we are in the process, the department in fact is in the process of appointing a new ombudsman. It's we because it's our department. And we don't believe in individualism. We don't believe in politics of Beyonce, me, myself, and I. We are a collective. Chairperson, a key development within the defense domain is the need for South Africa to adequately arm itself to deal with the dilemma of modern military threats. Crucially, the South African Defence Force should develop an information warfare, cyber warfare capabilities. The 2019 APP indicates that the Department of Defense will implement robust network security architecture, including appropriate segregation and segmentation between the IT and control system, including weapon system networks, using firewalls and intrusion prevention and detection tools. Furthermore, this year the department will continue consultation with the stakeholders towards the development of comprehensive cyber warfare strategy. The groundwork represents an important first step towards building a cyber defense capability. We will continue to monitor developments in this regard and urge future funding requirements to be cognizant of the need to address this particular project. Honorable members, transformation of the defense industry remains a critical strategic goal. In this regard, the Department of Defense established a National Defense Industry Council last year to facilitate a platform for government to support and repositioning of the defense industry. It is this body that has already developed the Defense Industry Strategy and the Defense Industry Charter, providing pathways for the transformation and growth of the defense industry, paving the way for youth and women to participate in that industry that was monopolized. And it was mainly white dominated. Chair, the Department of Defense has done well to balance its budget, and its budget addresses its main priorities irrespective of the challenges of a shrinking budget over the years. The South African Defence Force continues to fulfill its constitutional imperative to defend and protect, extend beyond the engagements in major combat operations to that safeguarding South Africa and its people in terms of both conflicts and peace. South Africa and its borders, strategic installation and air maritime continues to be protected under those circumstances. Honorable Chair, I think it will be important to note that the deployment of the SANDF to Cape was as a result of the challenges that are faced, in particular in this province, where more than 2,000 lives were lost. And that is a war against the people of Philippi but the DA is oblivious to that fact, and they want to pretend as if it's as business as usual. Therefore, we are calling upon the department to strengthen and continue to deploy, because one of the mandates of the defense is to protect and defend our people, not only against external threats, but also internally when our people
Honourable
are
member,
dying.
your time is now expired.
Thank you, Chair. The ANC, without fear of any contradiction, support this budget.
Thank you. I now call upon the Honourable Minister of Defence and Military Veterans to respond to the debate. Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, honourable members, for the debate. It was a very good debate. Thank you. Allow me to start by acknowledging the presence of the leadership of AMSCO, the board and the CEO, DMV, led by General Mgwebi, Appeals Board, the Advisory Council, the Defence Force Service Commission, and the Reserve Force Council. These are all the entities, they are here, and I wish to acknowledge your presence this morning. Thank you for joining us. Honorable members, it is true that the term of our military ombuds has come to an end, and we are now in a process of identifying a new military ombuds. But we want to thank General Matanzima for his tireless efforts to make sure that even though he was dealing with the grievances of soldiers, but he ensured that he strikes a very healthy balance in the relationship together with the South African National Defence Force. Thank you very much for that kind of political maturity, General Matanzima. Allow me to thank Dr. Kulube. I thought it was not the right time to thank you, Dr. Kulube, but now that it has been mentioned, we thank you for your service in government, and hopefully we will see you, even though you will not be in the department, but we will see you somewhere still serving the people of South Africa as you had committed yourself during your young days. Honorable members, the 5-year term of office of the Permanent Defence Force Service ended in September last year, May last year. We've appointed 4 new commissioners with effect from the 1st of January, who joined the 3 serving commissioners who were appointed with effect from the 1st of May 2015. We now intend to appoint 3 additional commissioners because most of all the commissioners who have been appointed are men, no women applied. Now we are all going all out to get 3 additional commissioners to come in as part of the Defence Force Service Commission. I've noted with appreciation the recommendations of the Commission General, and I'm sure wherever you are in the committee, you will continue with the agenda of pushing for your recommendations which you had submitted to me to be implemented by the Department of Defense. Of course, we know there have been fiscal constraints. Some of the recommendations you had made could not be complied with. But I do want to say that hopefully, even if you are in the committee, we will still continue to engage and facilitate for an opportunity between the committee and the Commander-in-Chief together with National Treasury. We've not given up on that one. Honorable members, I present to you this budget of the Department of Defense, an amount of 50.510 billion rands, which has been allocated for vote 19. And I'm appealing to all political parties to support this budget, and I'm sure the honorable members from the PAC will agree that if he does not vote for this budget, we will not be able to address the challenge which he raised of Mama who is dying and is threatening suicide in Umtata. So please give us that vote. Let's get this budget so that we can address some of the challenges which you've addressed here. Thank you very much, Honorable Members.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable members, you are reminded that the plenary to debate vote number 1, the presidency, will take place at 2 p.m. here in this chamber. That concludes the debate and the business of this mini plenary, and the mini plenary will now rise.